It ends today with the 7,000 round review of this Wilson Combat WCP320 full size. And just so I don't bury the lead, no, there was no uncommanded discharges with this firearm, but we will get into my thoughts on it and even a little bit into that situation. So we'll just go through the normal format and we'll see how it goes. What it is and why I bought it. This is a P320 that, by my knowledge, is made in-house, question mark, by Wilson Combat. From the reading I was doing online, they receive blank slides and parts, and then they assemble it, mill it, and QC it on their own. And I bought it because, as you know, I was looking to replace my worn out P10F. This was firearm in the lineup. I originally, when the P320s came out, did not like them at all. Tried them again around the time and thought they were better than I remembered, so I ended up buying this firearm. Going into the modifications to this gun, I had the slides sent off to ATEI, which in my opinion is one of the best slide milling companies out there, to get it milled for the acro. And then I also wanted to try out their shim sight, which might be kind of hard to see there, but it is like a stamped piece of metal that provides you a backup rear sight. And I tried shooting with just the irons, and it's close enough. I mean, for backup reasons, it's more than adequate. I just like how low profile it is and how clean it looks. I also got the Gray Guns trigger shoe with the over travel stop, Gray Guns recoil spring and rod. I believe it's 15-pound recoil spring. I forget the company, but the tungsten weights, the company that makes them, they're the same thing as the Wilson Comet ones, but they're a little bit bigger, so they're a little bit heavier. And then I also installed a plus 10 or 15% trigger return spring in that. We'll get to why later on in the review, but that is everything I've done to it. Most of that was done after the first 1,000 rounds. So going into the trigger, out of the box, it was just a touch over 4 pounds, and it wasn't really that bad. There were just some slight things I didn't quite like about it. For one, there was over travel, which is obviously why I got the trigger. And then when shooting, it has kind of like a lazy reset. Not that I ever outran the trigger, but coming from other striker fire guns, it felt a little bizarre to me. All that is to say, even before and now with the modifications, it does have a very good trigger for a striker fired handgun. And if you look, there's a little bit creep to the wall and then a bit of mush, and then it goes. So in my opinion, good striker fired trigger. Next on the list would be the ergonomics of this handgun. If you look at my other videos, I've compared this grip module to the Brower M1811, so you can get a more in-depth idea of my thoughts on that if you watch that video. But all that is to say, I do like the Wilson Combat grip modules. I think they're very ergonomic. I wish they made like a large version of this, because when I grip the handgun, I don't really get much support hand in on the frame. What I end up doing is getting more grip on my fingers than I do on the gun. So I wish they had the same exact thing, just a bit wider. And that was one of the things I preferred over the M1811, but that was my main gripe. The texture is good. I thought this kind of macro pattern wasn't gonna be my favorite. I ended up liking a lot, and then the aggressive front and rear stippling I liked quite a bit. It also has more of like a CZ Beretta kind of ergonomics to it than a 1911, which to me is a little bit weird, it coming from Wilson Combat, but definitely good ergonomics. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Going into the shooting characteristics of this handgun, again, stock, it was actually pretty favorable. The main downside with the P320 is because this was, I believe if you look it up, it's the SIG P250 is where this gun originally came from. That was a double action only handgun, I believe, or maybe it was SAD, I can't remember. But they essentially retrofitted that to be striker fired. And what you get with that is it is a very high bore axis gun, so you get a lot of flip when you shoot. Having said that, it does recoil very lightly, and it returns to target very well, even without the upgrades. It is a very positive shooting experience for me. The main issue being, like I said, one, it's flippy. Two, the lazy trigger return kind of Again, I don't know if like on the shot timer it really was that much of a difference, but it just felt odd and it made me feel slow shooting it, which is bizarre. And really, the base of it was this Wilson Combat P320. What you get from the factory is essentially what shoots like a very well broken in P320. Because out of the box, this felt like the rental P320 I was trying that had who knows how many rounds. Very smooth trigger, nice and smooth recoil, all of that. And it was just very nice to start that well. But obviously there was some downsides, so I did the modifications listed. And while it didn't completely tame the flippiness of it, the guide rod and 15-pound spring definitely helped. Pair that with the weights, it feels significantly less flippy than I think it should. It's kind of bizarre to me that it kind of knocked that much of it out of there. And then the plus 10-15% trigger return spring made it feel more like your standard Striker fired handgun. The downside to that spring is this creep you get, and kind of that mush after the wall is slightly heavier than a stock P320. But honestly, I didn't really notice it that much. It really wasn't that much of a difference. Again, I think this gun shoots very well, and even with the upgrades, even better. Now, in my 7,000 rounds with this gun, I only really encountered a couple issues. Most of it is nitpicks. Like I said in my other video, the rail on the WCP320 grip frame is not great for lights in general. The clamp or the thumb screw X300 is the only thing I get that would fit properly. The other issue, like I said, not getting enough support hand on the gun. Can't really do anything about that. But in terms of reliability, in the first, I think it was 1,000 rounds, this gun was very sensitive to fully loaded magazines, kind of slowing the slide to the point where if it was a fully loaded magazine and there was, like I was topping off, there's one in the chamber and then a fully loaded magazine, there was sometimes it would kind of choke on that first round where it wasn't feeding it properly. I would assume because there's not enough force from the slide to reliably shuck out and pick up the next round. That ended up working itself out as the magazines kind of broke in, and I would assume to a certain extent the gun broke in as well, as much as I don't like that term. So yeah, after the first, on a extreme level, let's say 1,000 rounds, that worked itself out. The other thing was right around 5,000 rounds, my extractor broke, and I can't remember if it was the spring or the extractor itself, but essentially it just wasn't stripping shells out of the gun at all. I'm not a gunsmith, so I don't know if those two issues kind of helped and hurt each other as things went along, but in replacing it, I put the Apex failure resistant extractor just to never really worry about that again, and the problem never showed up past that. Granted, 2,000 rounds versus 5,000 rounds, but that is my experience. So going into my final thoughts on this gun, this is easily, from my experience, the ones I've handled, the nicest P320 I've had. Granted, I didn't even get the really tuned up version. There's options to get these with a tuned trigger, but from what I was reading online, the trigger weight on those ends up going down to like 2 pounds and under, and for a defensive handgun, that just wasn't in the cards for me. So I just went standard trigger and then obviously did what I did. But yeah, one of the nicest P320s I've ever seen, if not the nicest. The serrations are great, the machining is great, everything is good, and it shoots well. It shoots very well, actually. I was pleasantly surprised. I've hit a lot of personal best times on drills and whatnot with this gun. The problem is the P320 is getting in its own way, let's say, and that's kind of why I shelved this. Because my original plan was I liked this so much I was gonna get a compact version to carry, but all these stories keep coming out, and like I can't trust that. You can say what you want and say that that's stupid. I've listened to engineers talk about the design and like there's no reason this stuff should be happening, but some of the videos and stories coming out, it's undeniable that it is happening. Some of it's the user's error, some of it definitely doesn't look like it. And just that level of sketchiness kind of steers me away from this platform in general. I know Wilson Combat, or I shouldn't say I know. I would hope Wilson Combat has a level of QC well above standard SIG, but the bad rap that this is getting has led me to shelf this, and that is why in the beginning I said it ends today, because I haven't touched this thing in like a year, and for me that means it's got to go. So I'll be trying to find a new home for this thing. I just can't. When you put a gun on a nightstand and you got to angle it a certain way just in case, it probably means it's time to go. So we'll run it through the Blicky breakdown board. You can see what I think about it. Again, not to say that this is a bad handgun. In fact, I actually think it's a great handgun, but I just can't. I'm not gonna trust something with a track record like that.